Welcome to Vantage Points by Mercado. I'm Michael Evanoff, and I'm joined by my co-host, Cari, Guittard.
Today, we're sitting down with David Johnston, Vice President of Asset Protection and Retail Operations for the National Retail Federation. David is a leading voice at the intersection of retail and security.
You know, retailers are dealing with epidemic levels of shoplifting.
He works to solve some of today's most pressing issues, including combating organized retail crime and leveraging cutting-edge technology to protect employees and consumers alike.
With 38 years of industry experience as a security practitioner and a strategic consultant, David's approach to retail security advocates for the collaboration between retailers, law enforcement, and policymakers. David, we're so excited to have you here.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here with you both.
Right off the bat, what consumer goods, retail goods, are worth protecting in your view?
Well, they are all worth protecting. And the reason for that is when it comes to our national economy, we have to protect the retail supply chain. And it's not only for the products themselves, which have safety value when you get into things like food and baby formula, but it's also the integrity of the product. You know, we have counterfeits, we have illicit products that take place. So to make sure that the consumer can trust the retail brands in selling products that are everyday essentials, it's imperative for them to protect those products. Now, what we've seen over the years is the valuable products, particularly for those who are committing theft, have gone from the high dollar, high value dresses, suits, and luxury goods to everyday products. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that because that's where that element of organized retail crime comes into play.
Speaking of OCR, what are you finding right now as we speak? What products are the top of their list?
Everyday goods.
Really?
It ranges, and that's the challenge for retailers. And that's why, unfortunately, we're starting to see retailers lock up a number of goods. We do a survey and a study every year. And, you know, our last year's survey, over 2/3 implemented security measures knowing it would impact the customer shopping experience. But again, it comes back to the availability of product, the safety of product. We are seeing a number of retailers look at technology and innovation, self-serving cases, for example, where a retailer may have a loyalty program and it's attached to the mobile phone. So a consumer can go up to that lock case and by hitting a button on their loyalty app, can release the case and allows them to self-access the merchandise. Or we have retailers who are making sure that where those products are located and secured, they have additional labor there to help the consumers. But it's an unfortunate environment because retailers know it impacts sales, it impacts the shopping experience, but it's necessary because of the issues we're facing today.
What is the mission of the NRF?
Our core mission is to advocate, educate, and inspire, you know, the retail industry. And for each of those things, the advocacy that we do is often tied to legislation. We want to make sure that the voice of retail is heard at the federal level and the state level, and any legislation that takes place doesn't greatly impact, you know, the industry as a whole. From the education perspective, it's about getting our members together and convening them to talk about best practices, to learn and understand what's happening in the industry. In my world, the threats, the risks, the challenges. We do that through our conferences, our councils, and our committees. And the last piece is we want to inspire. We want to make sure that people see the retail industry as an opportunity to enter the workforce, build a career in retail. You know, retail powers the economy. It promotes jobs. And our inspiration through not only the NRF, but also our NRF Foundation helps to bring people to the industry.
So what are the biggest shifts happening within the space that you think retail is really being impacted by?
It's retail theft and violence. Those are the two issues right now at the top of a retailer's priorities when it comes to a physical retail location. And it doesn't matter if you're a national brand, a big box store, or a mom and pop on Main Street, USA. When it comes to the retail theft side, it's the frequency of the individuals
from
shoplifting. It's from external.
Okay.
You know, and it's the frequency of repeat offenders. It's the quantity of merchandise that they're taking, and it's how they're taking that merchandise. You know, I'm just shy of a 4-decade career in retail asset protection, and shoplifting was always the invisible crime. It was something that somebody would go in, make the decision to steal goods, steal one or two items, usually through concealment, and try to leave. And if they were approached by security or by employees, most often they would just give back the merchandise for fear of prosecution or apprehension. Over the past several years, we've started to see more open and brazen thefts. And if you ask any CEO, they are going to tell you that they are more concerned about the violence against their employees and their customers than the product itself being stolen. The number of weapons displayed or threats of a weapon or actual use of a weapon has increased, all for product that is, in many instances, in a normal retailer, possibly costing under the threshold of any larceny or felony law, so under $1,000. And we're seeing employees beer sprayed, we're seeing employees threatened with knives, shot, and so forth. So what are retailers doing to cure that? First and foremost, they're reducing the number of apprehensions that their employees can make. And there are retailers who are just not allowing people to stop potential shoplifters. And then they're protecting the goods because, again, going back to securing the goods eliminates the individual from having to come and being able to come and steal the goods. Disruptive to the customers, but necessary for protecting the product and, more importantly, the people.
What are you finding that's helping you guys out?
Yeah, technology is going to play a vital role and continue to play a vital role in trying to curtail what we're seeing right now for theft and violence. Whether you're a store employee, a manager, and even in some instances, loss prevention, it's observe and report. Yeah. And then utilize your technology, utilize your camera systems, utilize the capabilities of your cameras to be able to identify that individual. You know, as I had mentioned previously, there's a big play with repeat offenders. These people who are stealing for greed are doing this as a business. They may not be the organizers or the middlemen or the head of the snake, so to say, but they're doing this because they know that when I steal this merchandise, I have a place to offload it, to resell it, and I go back and get it again. Oftentimes, they're even being directed. They're being told. We've seen instances where shoplifters have shopping lists that say this is exactly what we need to steal. We've seen shoplifters that have paperwork on this is the security layout of the store.
Oh, wow.
These are the security officers. So we have to get better at using technology to be able to identify, to observe, and then we may not catch them in that one instance, but can we catch them in their repeated instances? That's what we need for technology. It needs to be unified, integrated, actionable, and allow us to go from a reactive position to a preventative position.
Well, and on that point, have you seen retailers willing to share threat intelligence? Because if you're mapping repeat offenders, are you going to be willing to share that intelligence with, say, a competitor? Are you seeing that kind of collaboration?
They are. And I could tell you in my career, there has never been competition when it comes to safety and security. Retailers may compete against one another for that customer and for that sale, but when it comes for the safety and security of the retail industry, there's information sharing across all levels of an organization. And specifically now, again, with these organized groups, these repeated offenders, and as Mike had mentioned, they're either going to hit my stores multiple times, multiple stores, or they're going to go and hit multiple brands, multiple areas, with it maybe in the same area or other areas. So it's very important to get some information sharing. And that's where there are tools out there. There is technology that retailers and law enforcement use collaboratively.
Correct.
To be able to share information.
Besides technology, what are things that retailers are getting right? What are you seeing like, okay, this is best in class, or we're doing this better than we've done in the past?
Well, first and foremost, it's making sure that the employees are protected. Yeah. In today's day and age, and not only with the violence during the commission of a crime, but we've seen a rise in disgruntled customers and violence, guest on employee violence, and even the threat of active shooter in a retail setting or commercial setting is always there, right? Commercial settings, retail settings are usually in the top 3 every year when it comes to a mass shooting or an active assailant. So retailers are putting together the necessary elements to keep their people safe. And it's not just the response aspect of it. We've seen a lot of them move left of boom and get into the threat assessment and get into the threat mitigation and working collaboratively with cross-functional teams internally as well as partners outside. That partnership outside is another thing I think the retail industry can be very proud of, is their relationship with law enforcement and their communities. We have seen over a large number of communities, over 30 states in the last 2 years, amend or create new laws to help retailers with organized retail crime and shoplifting. We have I believe there are over 40 organized retail crime associations, we call them ORCAs, that are public-private sharing events between law enforcement and retailers. I think they're in every state, but perhaps 2 in the United States. So building the partnerships, being able to get out in front of the risks and the threats, and we're seeing more of them as we continue to evolve as an industry and a world. But the retailers are really doing right with what they can. And that's why the challenge we have is this current environment of theft and violence and organized retail crime. It is no longer a retail issue only to be solved. Shoplifting is not new. Professional shoplifting is not new. But what we're seeing today requires a whole community approach.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
So how do you bring all of your experience from managing restaurant security into this current role that you have?
Yeah, my career path has not been a ladder. I call it a roadway with a couple of exits and a turnaround and so forth. So, I came into this, as I had said, about 38 years ago with the intention of getting into federal law enforcement, Secret Service to be specific.
And you were an investigator, correct?
I was, and so I wanted to get into federal law enforcement, couldn't because of my eyesight at the time. Found retail security is what it was called back then, catching shoplifters, and then became an investigator. And then through my career started to work in different retail segments. And in each of those retail segments brought different brands, and then be able to grow into things like executive protection and event security. And then I took a twist, and for 15 years, I went on the solution provider side. So I was a product manager for an exception-based reporting and data analytics. So I worked on the solution provider side and then moved over to business development, some sales and consulting, and then came back as a practitioner to the franchised restaurant environment with Dunkin' Brands, which, believe it or not, many people don't realize that, they had over 22,000 franchise restaurants in about 65 countries. So it had a large global presence between Dunkin' and Baskin-Robbins were the 2 brands. So I had a very varied career, always staying in the private sector side, but through my career got to work a lot with the public sector side, including State Department, in all the work we did overseas and FBI and HSI and so forth. And then when this position came up, it was an opportunity to, what I say, is serve the industry, an industry that gave me a great career. I believe in the people, the purpose, the passion of what we're trying to do, particularly at this moment in time. So ORC was a growing issue when I came on board here. And it takes everything I have learned in the past. I think having both of those worlds where I've been a practitioner and I've been an industry partner helps me to work with our membership because it includes retailers and industry partners. I also believe that the work that I did in the franchise environment helps me because the franchisees in the Dunkin' environment, some of them were large organizations, Some of them were mom and pop organizations. So to be able to understand and talk to the different levels of organizations and leaders to help them, because security is not a one size fit all. Security is not a one device fit all. Yeah. So how do you protect with layers and segments and so forth?
Speaking of franchises, how do you convince that many franchises for like Dunkin' Donuts or Baskin Robbins that security should be top of mind and safety to the employees should be top of mind? Because given that we know that they buy into the franchise, you give them the tools to work it, but it's really up to them to identify and really execute the safety and security side of that house. How do you monitor that, number one? And number two, when you have a laggard, how do you address it?
Yeah, it's influence over authority. In a corporate environment, you have the policies, the procedures, and the mandates that must be followed. But as you had mentioned, Mike, in a franchise environment, you're restricted based on the agreements that you have, the franchise agreement. What can you do? What can't you do? And it comes to influencing them and educating them. And it's really being a consultant. It's providing them with an understanding of the value of loss prevention, what the core components are, what they're going to get, how they're going to be a better business,
absolutely,
how they're going to have better employee morale, and then just continuing to talk to them. And just like a corporate environment, in some instances, it takes a crisis or it takes an incident. And, the old saying, never waste a crisis.
Yes.
When that unfortunate incident does happen, you catch their ear. And it's no different in the franchise environment as a small business USA.
So where are the research gaps that you would encourage them to expand into that you're seeing right now?
Well, the one gap that we have in the retail industry is the ability to quantify the amount of loss. And I don't know if this is something specific that the LPRC can do, but it's one that we talk regularly about, Reed and myself and his team, is how can we get to a point where, we can understand what the actual losses are around ORC and theft, and internal theft, external theft. And it's been a challenge for us when we try to talk about the scope and scale of the problem. But it's also a challenge because, we know that even law enforcement numbers aren't 100% accurate. There are challenges with the UCR and NIBRs and who reports and who doesn't report. But I think we as an industry have to get together to say, what can we do to get better information sharing from a statistical perspective? We've got it from some of our industry partners on the investigative side, but what can we do from an industry statistics side?
This is an economic security issue. When you look at just the scale of this industry and what it means for our economy here domestically, with everything being centered so much around homeland security, are you framing it almost within that scope, or are there other ways that you're bringing lawmakers into this conversation so that they care about it and engage?
Yeah. We frame it how it needs to be framed, that it is in fact beyond the scope of shoplifting for need. So we get into the conversations and when we speak to the policymakers, and this is at state level as well as federal, we focus on the federal side, but we work with state retail associations and we do get involved in state legislation. But we want to make sure that, they do understand the challenges that the retailers are facing and the impact that not only the retailers, but the impact to the employees, the impact to the consumers, the impact to the communities, which are all their constituents. Mm-hmm. So, we do have to get in as we continue to learn more and more about the organized aspect of retail crime. We're starting to have conversations about the national security. There have been investigations that have been done at the federal level that have tied Chinese gangs to drug cartels, to fentanyl, to human trafficking, to gift card and retail crime. There are instances where, human trafficking and drug and weapons trafficking have taken place because of the profit and proceeds of organized retail crime. So we have to have those conversations.
Are you finding traction there?
We are, and I'll tell you what we have done more recently is to get the retail LP and AP leaders to Capitol Hill. So this year alone, we've had 3 instances where retail LP and AP leaders have gone to Capitol Hill and had conversations. And those are powerful conversations because they bring the everyday reality. I can only speak so much about what they're seeing because I'm not in their shoes, but to have them have a conversation with somebody, and in many instances, a politician or legislator who is they are constituents of. They see that they say politics is local. Even at the federal level, it has to be local. So we are starting to see, the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, which was introduced or reintroduced this April, already has over 150 co-sponsors in the House and 30 co-sponsors in the Senate. It is probably one of the most bipartisan bills that are out there right now today. The last one was extremely bipartisan. We're seeing the same thing today. So we're hopeful and hoping that Congress sees that this is, in fact, a much needed bill to bring the level of support to the local and state law enforcement, to the communities, to retail. So it's a continuing conversation. We've definitely seen over the years, or at least the last 3 years that I've been here, the conversations change. It was stages. It was, isn't it just shoplifting? To, okay, so now it's local gangs that are organized. Okay, so now there's a transnational component to, wow, this is really having an impact on our national economy and to retailers, and something we have to look at from the whole community.
Well, it speaks to the extraordinary efforts of the NRF that you're bringing together not just the data behind all of this and that the critical research, but also the human side of these stories. And you recently announced that you have an initiative to address the opioid crisis in the country. Do you mind sharing a little bit of that?
Like the retail crime, it's something that our society is being impacted by, but often it's using the retail industry or sector as the place of committing the crime or committing the act, right? Again, my Dunkin' days, being a quick serve restaurant with multiple locations and very easy in, easy out, we would have a lot of conversations with franchisees about opioid use and narcotics use in the bathrooms. We would unfortunately have a lot of overdoses that would take place. So, stepping out and taking this step and saying, look, it's a fair request. It's asking for them to, for the most part, extend the Good Samaritan law that's already exists to the use of helping someone in need with Narcan. And then it's making Narcan available for retail establishments. And when we say retail establishments, it's restaurants, it's groceries, it's what we call traditional retail. Make Narcan available and make it the training available and do it so that the retailers are there should an unfortunate incident occur.
It's a tremendous leadership step that you're taking.
It's absolutely excellent. It's absolutely. Is there challenges that NRF sees with online versus the brick and mortar that you can talk about?
Yeah, the challenge is the convergence between criminal actors. Now, the physical, the digital, and the cyberspace. In two examples, as I had mentioned, is, the buy online, pick up in store, and the Boris and the BOPIS is what we call buy online, pick up in store, buy online, return in store. We have, that can happen in the digital realm with e-commerce. So you're dealing with bad actors who might do account takeovers or steal PII or financial information, and they'll go and they'll purchase merchandise using stolen credentials or stolen financial instruments, and then they'll have runners pick the merchandise up in the store. Or they'll do the opposite and say, buy online, return it in the store in order to secure the product, which is then resold for goods, or secure the monies. The second one is strategic cargo theft, which, that term, strategic cargo theft, I never heard of 2 years ago. And the difference between traditional cargo theft and strategic cargo theft is traditional cargo theft is the hijacking of a trailer, right? A quick example. Guys come in and with force, they'll take a trailer, get rid of, get the driver out of the truck and steal the trailer full of goods. On a strategic cargo theft, they'll create a phony company or create a false bill of lading using cybercrime techniques, phishing scams, and things of that nature, create a false bill of lading or establish a false company, and they're not stealing the truck. They're walking right in to the distribution center, handing them what looks like a valid document and just driving off and waving to the security officer on the way out. And so we're starting to see, again, at an organized level, that convergence of physical crimes, digital crimes, and cyber crimes starting to come up. And for the retailer, that's why, again, it gets very important to create some unified data approach so that you can start to monitor and measure what's happening across all your channels.
David, what would be the risk to the retail industry not endorsing technology in this environment now that you see?
Well, retail thrives on its use of technology. The evolution of retail is all about technology. So, if we look at retail overall, it's, how the products are being shipped, how they're being monitored for inventory. We talked about RFID earlier. You have payment processing and payment methods. One thing we do know is that the customers are demanding a very hyper-personalized experience in how do I shop, where do I shop, how do I pay? And that involves technology. And, we've all embraced technology into our daily lives. So for retailers not to take that technology and utilize it in their industry, we would see the retail industry really just come to a halt. On the security side, it's safety of life. It's the ability to make sure that we're protecting people, and whether it's cameras, access control points, air sensor technology, as we see the threats and the risks and the challenges there, technology is a must, and we know that the bad actors are going to use technology against us. Yeah. So we have to be not only there and prepared, we have to be in front of it.
How do retailers embrace technology while also being mindful of privacy?
That's a great question, because a lot of the technology that retailers are looking to use, will have an impact on consumer privacy, whether it be the protection of data, or in some cases when it comes to facial recognition, body-worn cameras, even the visual display of one's image or appearance. And I think that what they need to look at is to first, and this is actually Elizabeth Davies did a great presentation at Verkada One this week on facial recognition and laid out a framework of, before implementing any technology, you have to have a need and a plan. And that has to be based on, metrics and information within your organization. Then you also have to make sure that when you go to implement it, it doesn't have to at first be company-wide. Pilot, test. And that pilot and test should include your employees. Be very upfront with your employees. What is the technology being used? What is their role in the technology? How is it going to look if they're using the technology or part of the technology? And then I think another piece is being very upfront with your consumers. We've seen body-worn cameras starting to be implemented in a lot of retail environments, and that includes signage, that includes documentation, and then you have to look at measuring it. And is it actually right for your environment? There are some folks who might pilot a technology and then realize that it's just not right at this time. But we have to look at technology not as being fearful of it, but being, where does it have its place in every organization? And it may have to be different in one organization than another, but again, necessary if we want to make sure that we're there to protect our people and our product.
David, thank you so much for being here and enlightening us with the NRF. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Cari. Pleasure being here with you both.